What's going on, guys? In this video, I'm going to look over CleanSpark. I'm going to talk about how we're ending this quarter and Bitcoin is continuing to rise in price. And sorry if you guys hear a little bit of background noise. You might hear a little bit of background noise throughout parts of this video, but we're going to look at CleanSpark on the chart. We're going to look at Bitcoin on the chart, and I'm also going to mention Indi semiconductors. It has been gaining in price along with a lot of other small caps now that we got past the Fed meeting. So if you guys like these videos, you know what to do, and let's get started. And first off, I want to touch on Bitcoin. We're trying so hard to stay above 40,000, and I still think a break of 40,000 would bring us into the 38s, because when we finally broke our 38,000 resistance, we did see a continuation all the way into the 40s. I am still watching for this green ascending line here. The market may react if we break it and if we get a candle actually closing under it. We have wick down under it, but we haven't had an actual candle close under it. And you know, over the weekend, Bitcoin did start pulling back a little bit. So I did expect some pulling back on the miners. We did see a little bit of a red pre-market. However, some of the miners are starting to turn green as of this upload right now. And we do have CleanSpark slightly green here, but it did pull back pre-market, so you have to consider that. But I do think if we can break above $11, we will continue to run here. But obviously it is highly dependent on Bitcoin. I do think if Bitcoin breaks that 40,000, heads towards 38, I think it's very, very likely that CleanSpark will fill this gap. But you know, there's always the chance that Bitcoin doesn't break 40,000 and CleanSpark doesn't fill that gap. While most gaps do get filled, there's always the possibility that this one doesn't. And while this would be a great opportunity to buy some CleanSpark if we attempt to fill that gap, I think even here, it's still a solid DCA. For those of you that didn't really take advantage of CleanSpark during most of 2023, when we were anywhere from like $2 all the way to where we are now in the 10s. And I do think CleanSpark still offers a lot of gains over the next year, 2 years. Now we are getting towards the end of the year, and that is the end of another quarter for CleanSpark. And keep in mind that they posted this expected revenue back in their last earnings. They're expecting a $66 million quarter, and they gave that expectation right at the end of November. Bitcoin has appreciated in price since then, and you'll notice that basically the 1st of December is when we started running towards 40,000. And because of this recent run up throughout December for Bitcoin, even though we're cooling off now, Bitcoin's still higher than where it was at the end of November. So December is going to turn out to be a really good month for CleanSpark in terms of mining revenue. And of course, it only gets better in the new year when they're getting more and more machines going, when the energy provider gives them the energy they need to get the Sandersville site up and running. And another thing to think about is while this quarter is ending at the end of this year, December is the last month for this quarter, we're not reporting it until closer to February. And of course, this day could slightly change, but somewhere around February, we're going to report our year-end quarter, and they're already expecting a record-breaking quarter for revenue. But with Bitcoin's run-up throughout December, if we continue gaining momentum by the end of the year, I think it's very likely we see a $70 million quarter. If Bitcoin cools off a bit towards the end of December, gets back to the 38s, I do think we'll still beat this 66 million expected revenue. And there's even a chance that they see profitability before the halving. So depending on CleanSpark's price around February when they're about to report earnings, this could be a potential place to start selling covered calls, potentially trim some off the top for people that are a little short-term minded. And for any of you that think there will be a little bit of a pullback for the miners when we come to the halving, because of course their rewards are getting cut in half. But I do believe that Bitcoin's price appreciation will more than make up for it. But it might not play out that way. We might be somewhere where we're at still for Bitcoin, although I find it very unlikely. I think by the halving we'll be pushing towards the all-time highs. We might not have broke them yet, but we will be probably approaching 60,000 if not higher. And you know, you gotta ask yourself, well, if these miners survived when Bitcoin was 15,000, why wouldn't these miners survive after the halving, even if Bitcoin's somewhere in the 30,000s? At the bottom of the bear market, Bitcoin got to 15,000. It shook out a lot of the weaker companies, the core scientifics of the world, got rid of a lot of bad exchanges that were doing wrong things with people's money, that weren't being diversified enough with their money, and it definitely bit them in the end. But you know, I really do think towards February would probably be a great time to start selling some covered calls. Currently, I have January $20 strike covered calls, which I think are very unlikely to hit. And covered calls are a great way to make some passive income with the possibility of selling some shares at an even higher price than we're at. So if you have some worries that CleanSpark may pull back a little bit, I do think it's a good way for some passive income while CleanSpark potentially pulls back in price, making it unlikely that your covered call will get executed and you'll be assigned selling your shares. I do think it's a great strategy as things get overbought on the chart. And like I said, you know, to me, the likelihood of CleanSpark getting anywhere near $20 by January is pretty unlikely. So I think it's pretty safe to go with some out of the money covered calls. You know, it's possible that CleanSpark gets to $12.50. I would probably avoid that covered call. I think that's way too early to sell CleanSpark at. And as we move up in price, you can move your strike higher and higher on covered calls. You can of course roll them out. You know, there are ways to get out of a covered call if you're scared that you're going to have to sell your shares. That said, I do think covered calls are a great strategy when things get overbought on the chart. Same with selling cash secured puts. But let me know what strategy you guys have for CleanSpark. Are you considering selling before the halving, or are you going to ride this into 2024, 2025? Now, I also want to give you guys an update on Indi. We're a little bit overbought on the chart, and we're coming to an important point on the price. This roughly $9 area, you know, it seems to be there's huge swings in either direction when we get to that area. You can see that typically it doesn't stop there. We either get an accelerated move up and then it breaks back under, or it simply finds it as resistance. So this is going to be an important time to watch Indi stock. And another thing to look at is this long tightening pattern we've been in. If we find resistance here, which is very possible, we are overbought on the chart, we may start pulling back, retracing a bit, which to me would be one of the last great buying opportunities for Indi as they get to profitability, as we get to Fed cuts, which will help currently unprofitable companies. But Indi expects profitability, and we're just going to have to wait for their upcoming call to see if what they said was really going to play out. And they're now expecting a $72 million quarter for revenue, which is just absolutely fantastic revenue growth. And like I said, they expect profitability, which is huge for this company. They have an increasing backlog, and let me quickly show you some of the companies that they supply chips to. And here's a list of just some of the companies Indi supplies their semiconductor chips to. We have the largest of the largest American names. They basically have their hold on every market. We have Chinese vehicles, we have the BYDs of the world, the XPengs, the Li Autos, so EVs as well. And with some of their recent acquisitions such as Geo, they're getting even more saturation in markets that otherwise companies really don't get a chance to get into. So these guys have a fantastic merger and acquisition strategy. We have some of the best execs out there, hands down. They've grown their management team over the last year or two. And when I first saw this slide, there was like 7-8 people. Now we have a lot more people from previously acquired companies such as Analog Devices, such as Traction. And many of these execs have actually worked together hand in hand for decades. They have experience working together, which I do think is very, very important from a management perspective. If the team is working together, working in tandem, that's much better than a bunch of different executives with a bunch of range of different ideas, different viewpoints. I think all of these execs see the same vision, and I really do think Indi is going to play out to be one of the top, auto semiconductor companies in the world over time. They will get to profitability, and they'll see even more money come in as vehicles need more and more chips in the future. Self-driving, lane assist, advanced driving assistance systems, these are all things that are being implemented in more and more cars, and Indi's at the forefront of it. But if you guys are curious about Indi, I'll try to provide you a video at the end screen. This is definitely a company I have a lot of conviction in. I have a lot of faith in Indi Semiconductor, along with CleanSpark, and I expect both of these companies to do very well over the coming years. But let me know what you guys think. How do you feel about CleanSpark short term? How do you feel about Indi? And do you think Bitcoin's gonna break that 40,000 and head towards the high 30s, giving us one last great buying opportunity for CleanSpark, potentially filling that gap? Thanks as always for watching, guys. Let me know what you're buying out there, and have a good rest of your day.